Welcome to the Redeeming Stories podcast. I'm Julie M. Lane, and today's conversation is one that gently shifts the way we think about healing. So often we think of healing as something internal, something that happens through reflection, through conversation, and through time. But what we don't always consider is how much our external world shapes that process. The spaces we live in and the environments we move through every day, the way our surroundings either support us or quietly drain us. Today, I'm joined by Kristen Giacomini, an interior designer and the founder of Flow Designs in Reno, Nevada. Kristen approaches her work from a deeply personal space. After experiencing significant loss at a young age, along with her own health challenges, Kristen began to see just how connected our environment is to our well being. Her work today is not simply about creating beautiful spaces, but about designing homes and environments that reduce stress, create clarity, and support a more intentional way of living. In this conversation, we will explore how loss shapes perspective, how our homes can become a part of our healing, and what it looks like to build a life that feels aligned and not just for good looks from the outside. Kristen, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie.
Absolutely. As I've shared and as you've shared with me, you've experienced profound loss at a very young age. How did that begin to shift the way you saw life and eventually the way you approached your work?
Yeah, for me, I started interior design school with my mom, and I get emotional, but for me when I lost her in the process of getting my degree in interior design, I it what shifted in me was that I felt like interior design for a moment was so materialistic. When I lost her, I realized like I really wanted to do something that gave back to this world, and I didn't think interior design was the way that could be. With everything that happened with my mom, I just felt like I really needed to find something that had a greater purpose. And it took me a little time off of just kind of wandering and dealing with the grief I was experiencing. So it took me a little time to realize that there is actually a lot of ways I can help people through their environments and through the degree I had. And losing my mom and us having the dream to pursue the interior design field together eventually kind of backed my whole desire to continue with that path and choose a way to help people with it.
No, your thoughts about how touching one's lives. My music was the central part of my life for years, both professionally and personally. And I'm now coming back to it after a long hiatus and working hard to accept that my music does touch other lives and that um it's not only an expression for me, but it's how to help others um find their own space and be who they want to be.
Yeah, I feel that with what I do every day, and that makes me feel good.
That's awesome. You said your work goes beyond beautiful spaces. What does that mean to design a space that truly supports how someone lives?
This is something I've worked through the past 15 years as I've become a designer, but as a mom now, as a business owner, I realize so much more clearly what our environment does to us. And for me, I do a lot of residential homes, and I feel like we all carry so much weight in this world that when we get home at the end of the day, our home should be a place that allows us to let that weight down and relax and exhale. And for me, I've found that through simply being a little more organized. I had many years of being super unorganized, but with kids and with a busy life, when you are more organized, it helps your process become easier if you're cooking dinner or doing homework or getting dressed. And then on top of that, we talk about being organized, but just not having a ton of stuff cluttering your space, which really affects you emotionally. And we get caught up in our environments that we think we always forget what is actually causing you emotional harm and maybe making your daily routines a little bit harder. But simple things, by just cleaning your space up and being a little more organized, it doesn't have to be perfect, but little things like that really help you live an easier life day to day.
It's interesting, when you mention clutter. I I have always been a highly organized person, but I didn't realize, how much clutter I had, especially after my parents had passed, and how much I inherited and stuff I brought that I really don't want and don't need, and how much clearing out I did. Um, I've always known that I like straight lines, I like things that look clean, um, more uh, bold colors, not bold as in bright, but strong colors with maybe a little bit of design mixed in. My dad was an architect, and so I've picked up a lot on I've inherited or genetically, he's passed on those values that he had. When you're working with families, Kristen, how do you help them find um, the words to describe what creates that space for them?
It's really getting down to finding out how they work in that space, how they live in that space, and listening to their stories about where they've traveled or what pieces feel good to them. Because I don't think your home should be filled with brand new things. I think it should be filled with memories that make you feel good. And it's touching on those. And you brought up a really good point about clutter, and when you lose a parent or someone close to you, and you inherit all these things and you become attached to them, and it becomes so hard to let them go because you feel like maybe you're letting go part of them. And I've had to work through that. But I found once I let it go, I don't think about it again. It's once it's out of the space, it feels better. I try and work that through with families. I don't focus, I'm not an organizational designer, but I do like to bring up the fact that with a more systematic process in your life and hanging on to things that actually mean something to you, even if they aren't the most trendy item, that's where you can really touch on those areas in their home that will feel lighter and make them feel happier at the end of the day, so they can let go of that load they're carrying and breathe.
No, I think that's so true. I've had to spend a lot of times reflecting on what was I told I needed growing up? What was I told that I should or shouldn't have? And then what do I actually want? And for me, I've learned I value quality over quantity. I'm much more of a minimalist than my parents were as world travelers. And so my dad's really influenced quite a bit of how I like to create my spaces. So how does your mom continue to influence how you do your work every day, how you show up and be present for others?
You know what? That's heavy for me because my mom was very kind and generous, and I try and bring that through everything I do. I find that giving someone the benefit of the doubt that they're having a bad day, and that's just a moment that you can kill them with kindness. And so every choice I make as a mom or as a business owner, it really is about thinking about my mom and how she would react, and trying to carry that grace throughout my practice. And um, she was very creative. So, I naturally am creative, but I find that as a just a human, being kind is the most important thing you can be. And it's kind to others, it's kind to yourself. And so every decision I make, I think about her and you know, she wasn't perfect, but I do like to think that, how would she react to this? And then I try and bring her forth. She's a compass for me in moments that I need a little more guidance and support.
Thank you for sharing that, Kristen. Yeah, sometimes talking about special people in our lives that have passed on can be challenging, but finding the way to honor them and even continue to express who they are through ourselves, I think is very powerful. I know you're very passionate about self-talk. So, how do you see the connection between the way we speak to ourselves, as you were talking about with kindness, and the life we begin to create around us?
Man, this is huge. I believe everything you have in your life is a product of the conversation you have with yourself. Um, how you're inspired, the dreams you create, all of it. And I learned that because my mom was my biggest supporter. And when she passed, I realized that I needed to be that person for myself. And so tell it what you tell yourself. You know, you can be so motivated and you can have all the desire to do something, but if you're not reminding yourself that you can do it, that it's possible, I've just learned that there's no one else that can do that for you. You can't motivate yourself to do the action without kindly speaking to yourself. And trying to be more positive about things and looking on the brighter side of things, the glass is half full, all of those things end up really helping you gear up to take action and change your life because I believe the only way you can create the life you want is by creating that action to change it. No one else is going to do it for you. And that's been a really powerful thing, dealing with the loss, dealing with any struggle in life, anyone trying to tell you you're not good enough, um, imposter syndrome, breakups, friendships, things that are hard. You could go down a spiral of just deep demons. And if you can work on pushing those out and saying things to yourself that are more positive, I found that more good things come from it.
That's awesome. And those are the kind of things I need to hear. Um, for me, I try to be the person to myself that I was for my daughters and that I continue to be for my daughters who are now, very much into adulthood. I didn't have the type of mother you're describing. Not that my mom was a bad person, but she was tough. And I've had to learn to talk to myself as if I was talking to my girls and raising them. So finding that person in your life or that persona in your life that can push you in a positive direction is huge. It's great that you have a role model to help you continue forward. If someone is listening today and they're feeling overwhelmed or disconnected, what is one simple way they can begin creating a space that supports them?
You know, I was thinking about this and as someone who creates environments that I feel like help your life be a little more fluid. My thought is that if you can let something go physically or emotionally, if you let something go to declutter your space physically, that will make your space feel better. But I think it goes with also the emotional baggage that we hang on to. The stuff we can't let go of even though we try. And I always say if you've had something for longer than a year and you don't use it, get rid of it. But I think that goes for our emotions too, right? Like if I've been hanging on to something that's painful, how can we try and just let it go? So, it's so much easier said than done, but it goes back to that self-talk. And then also, I was thinking also when I get down, doing something for someone else always cheers me up. So that would be another really like great way of making space in your life for feeling better is to help someone else and then see how it makes you feel. And that might brighten your day and maybe create more action for you to um, do something good for yourself to feel better. Yeah.
No, I think that's so true. I can't think of how many times in my helping someone that they have in turn, I feel, given me more back than I gave just because of their appreciation. Um, so I definitely understand that message. Kristen, before we wrap up today, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, knowing that our listeners are those who've experienced trauma, they've experienced abuse? Any other thoughts you might like to share with them?
It's so heavy. We all deal with heavy, hard things. And through some of my darkest moments, I had to always just remind myself that we'll get through it, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that if you hang on to hope, that there will be something beautiful waiting for you.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. As I reflect on this conversation with Kristen, I'm reminded that healing is not only something we carry within us, it's something we build around us. The space we create, the way we speak to ourselves, the choices we make in our daily lives all become part of the process. And at Redeem Thyself, there's something I often come back to, and that is that healing is not about becoming someone new, but about creating alignment between who we are and how we live. And through the lens of seven petals, I think of it as rhythm, the environment, that mindset, the intention, all working together to support something that feels steady, even when life has not always been that way. If you're listening and feeling disconnected from your space or your life, maybe the question is not what needs to be fixed, but what needs to be supported. Kristen, thank you so much for being here, for your thoughtfulness, your perspective, for sharing your heart, your story, and the way you're helping others create spaces that truly hold them. So until next time, this is Julie M. Lane, and this is the Redeeming Stories podcast.